Hi, I'm Sophia. They called me the family failure, told me I wasn't daughter enough, smart enough, worthy enough. Then threw me out like I was nothing. 9 years later, my phone rang. Dad was dying, needed heart surgery. So I walked into his ICU room in a white coat and said, "Hello, I'm the chief surgeon." You ever wonder what happens when the one they cast aside becomes the only one who can save them? Before we dive in, what time are you listening? And where are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. I was always the one who colored outside the lines. Not literally, I could stay inside the margins just fine. But in a house where my sister's trophies lined every shelf, debate team, Junior Realtor of the Year, some local beauty pageant I brought home, science fair ribbons, and anatomy sketches that got stuffed into drawers no one opened. My name is Sophia. I was the youngest, and from the moment I could read, I was fascinated by what made people tick. Bones, muscles, nerves. While other girls dressed Barbie, I bandaged her with gauze and pretended she was in triage. My parents called it a weird phase. My sister Madison called me the little doctor of losers. Everyone laughed. I didn't. By the time I was 16, I stopped trying to explain myself. I did my part: family dinners, Sunday church. But I kept my real plans quiet. I wasn't interested in selling condos or marrying rich like Madison. I wanted to become a doctor. Not the glamorous kind. The kind that showed up at clinics no one talked about. So I applied for a scholarship behind their backs. Pre-med full ride, if I made it. I mailed the envelope myself on a cold morning, while Madison blared music in the car. I remember the day they found out. Madison opened my mail, said she thought it was junk, and waved the acceptance letter like it was a punchline. Community college, pre-med. Are you joking? You could have had Dad's investment group in your pocket. Instead, you're aiming for scrubs and syringes. I looked at my mom. She didn't speak, just pressed her lips together like she tasted something bitter. My dad exhaled through his nose, the way he did when he read disappointing stock reports. No one congratulated me. A week later, they invited me to a dinner at Vincenzo's, the only nice restaurant in our small Connecticut town. It was supposed to be for my graduation AA in biology. I got dressed up. I even wore the pearl studs my mom gave me at 13. I told myself this was it. Maybe they saw me now. Maybe they understood I was doing it my way. The table was long. Cousins I hadn't seen in years were there. Madison wore her usual smug smirk, her diamond engagement ring catching every bit of light like it was trying to blind me. I should have noticed the signs. The way nobody toasted. The way Dad didn't ask me about school. They just asked vague questions. So what's next? Are you really going to keep doing this? Then came dessert. A chocolate soufflé was set in front of me. It looked beautiful, perfect crust, dusted with powdered sugar. But I couldn't taste a thing, because that's when my father cleared his throat and said, "We've been talking, Sophia." I looked up. Everyone was watching me, not smiling. "You're the family failure," he said. "You always were." The words didn't feel like a slap. They felt worse, like a slow unraveling. Like every good grade, every late night, studying every hour in the lab had never existed. My mom didn't speak. She just nodded. Madison chimed in like she was adding to a report card. We all agreed. You've made your choices. We're just finally respecting that. You can do your bleeding heart thing, but don't expect our support. Then she slid an envelope across the table. A little something to help you start over. It held maybe $200 cash. No note, no card. Just money like a handout to someone they'd written off. And then they stood, all of them, like it was a rehearsed exit. No hugs, no goodbye. They left me sitting there with that soufflé in an envelope that felt more like a death certificate than a gift. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat my hands flat on the linen tablecloth, staring at the fork I hadn't touched. A server passed by, hesitated, and asked gently if I was done with my meal. I nodded. Outside, the air was bitter. My heels clicked against the pavement as I walked toward nowhere. I didn't have a plan, but I had my purse, and in it, my student ID and a cheap enamel pin that read, Student Doctor. It had cost me $3 at the bookstore, but that pin meant everything. It said, I had chosen myself. As I crossed the bridge over the Housatonic River, I could still hear Madison's voice. You always were. But this time, it didn't echo. It faded. I looked up at the night sky hands in my coat pockets, clutching that pin like it was a compass. I didn't say a word. I just walked out of that restaurant and out of their story. The cold air outside the restaurant bit at my skin as I stepped off the curb. I didn't look back. The clatter of dishes and muffled conversation faded behind me, replaced by the low hum of traffic and the quiet ache sitting heavy in my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I just kept walking. A few blocks later, I spotted a 24-hour diner, tucked between a pawn shop and a nail salon. Its neon sign flickered like it was tired, too. I slid into a booth near the back and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a bowl of chicken noodle soup. $4. I stretched it for an hour, letting the steam warm my face as I stirred the broth more than I ate it. No one texted to ask where I was. My phone stayed silent, screen black on the sticky table. I didn't bother reaching out either. What would I say? That they'd handed me an envelope like a pity prize and walked out without a second glance. By 2 a.m., the waitress had refilled my water twice and looked ready to ask me to leave. I thanked her softly, left 2 crumpled singles on the table, and slipped back into the night. My car, a dusty silver Corolla with a cracked rearview mirror, was parked just outside campus. I climbed into the back seat, curled up beside 2 trash bags, stuffed with everything I owned, and pulled a sweatshirt over my head like a blanket. That night, and many nights after, the car became my home. Morning started early, before security could do their rounds. I'd sneak into the campus gym, where my student ID still worked, and shower quickly in the locker room before class. I'd brush my hair in the mirror, trying to make it look less like I'd slept in a sedan. Then I'd change in a stall, stuff my clothes back into a backpack, and walk into my first lecture like nothing was wrong. Every day was a tightrope walk. Smile too much, and someone might think I had time for small talk. Look too tired, and someone might ask questions. So I kept my head down, hit the books hard, and made sure my name stayed on top of every quiz, every lab, every exam. Still, there were cracks. One afternoon, after lab Professor Kellerman lingered as I packed up, she was the only one who ever really looked at me, like she was trying to see past the neat notes in perfect attendance. "You've got something most people don't," she said. Her tone, quiet, almost private. Stillness, even when everything's on fire around you. I nodded, too stunned to respond. I didn't know if she meant it as praise or a warning, but it stuck with me. That word, stillness. Like being invisible could be a strength, not a weakness. That night, I parked behind the medical library. The lot was mostly empty, but I liked the way the building lights cast soft shadows across the dashboard. It made the inside of the car feel less like a cage. I was bone-tired from rotations. My legs ached. My chest felt hollow. When I leaned my head back against the seat, my eyes burned, but I wasn't sure if it was from exhaustion or the tears I'd been holding in for days. I reached under the passenger seat and pulled out a worn photo I kept tucked in an old biology textbook. It was me and Grandpa Henry, taken when I was 9. We were at a fire station open house. He'd been a paramedic for over 30 years. In the photo, he's crouched beside me, my small hand in his much bigger one, both of us holding the same bandage roll. "Your hands will save lives one day," he used to tell me. "Don't ever let anyone make you believe otherwise." He'd passed away before I graduated high school. Never saw me get my white coat, never knew they'd call me a failure across a dinner table like it was gospel. But I held on to that photo like it was truth. That night I let myself cry. Not loudly, just quiet tears soaking into my collar. For everything I had lost. For the warmth I missed. For how invisible I had become. A few weeks later, things changed. But not in some dramatic movie-like rescue. It was subtle. I'd submitted a personal essay for a small scholarship. Truthfully, I barely remembered doing it half asleep in the library one night. I didn't expect anything. Then, one Monday, I was pulled aside after class. The financial aid office had received confirmation of a disbursement, enough for me to apply for campus housing. My hands trembled when I signed the paperwork. I didn't ask who had nominated me. I didn't want to know. All I was told was it came from a former professor who admired my resilience. That weekend, I moved into a single dorm room at the far end of West Hall. It was small, one bed, a desk, a lamp with a flickering bulb. But it was mine. No trash bags, no fogged windows, no waking up to frost on the inside of the windshield. I didn't tell anyone. I still walked the same halls, wore the same clothes, kept my head down. But at night, I had a door that locked. I could stretch my legs without bumping into a steering wheel. But I couldn't shake what they'd done. Not the eviction that was just the final act. It was the years before. The way they'd taken my paychecks for granted. The way they'd expected me to cover their mistakes while calling me one. So that night, after settling into my dorm, I opened my laptop. The screen bathed the room in cold light as my fingers moved with purpose. One by one, I pulled up the accounts. Electric, water, gas, all in my name. I hovered over the cancel button on the utilities portal, my finger trembling just once before pressing down firmly. The electric bill gone, the water bill gone, the gas bill gone. Each click felt like cutting an invisible cord that had kept me tethered to a house where love was measured in convenience and betrayal was wrapped in silence. Next came the bank account, the one my mother insisted we keep joint for emergencies. I moved my remaining funds into a private account I had set up months ago, back when a tiny voice inside me warned that this day would come. Transfer complete. The cable and internet accounts were next. Services they used daily, mindlessly, never realizing it was my name, on the bills. My paychecks funding their binge-watching marathons and endless scrolling. Cancel, cancel, cancel. Each click was a small reclamation of power they thought I didn't have. I paused briefly over the auto insurance. Dad's truck, Mom's battered Camry, both covered under my plan to save them a few $100 a month. I could almost hear Mom's voice from last year, sweet and sticky, saying, "You're so good with money, honey. It just makes sense." Sure it did. For them. I clicked remove vehicle on each one. When the last account was severed, I closed the laptop with a soft snap. The silence in the room felt different now. Lighter, sharper. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about anger anymore. It was about balance, They wanted me gone. Fine. But they would finally feel what it meant to lose the daughter who had held their fragile little world together with invisible thread. Downstairs, somewhere in Connecticut, the TV would keep blaring for one more night. I wondered how long it would take before the lights flickered out, before the heater sputtered its last gasp, before reality crept into their little bubble of self-righteousness. I wasn't sticking around to find out. Tomorrow, I would be gone. But tonight, I started pulling the first bricks from the foundation they had so carelessly built on my back. Morning light barely seeped through the cheap blinds of Elena's apartment when my phone buzzed angrily against the nightstand. Groggy, I pulled the covers tighter around me, hoping irrationally that it was a wrong number. But a glance at the screen shattered that hope. 12 missed calls, Mom, Dad, a few unfamiliar numbers, probably neighbors or extended family. I didn't listen to the voicemails right away. I just stared at the list, feeling a complicated knot of emotions tighten in my chest. A twinge of guilt tried to surface. I shoved it down. They made their choice. Rolling onto my back, I tapped through my cousin Tyler's text first. It was blunt, straight to the point, like he always was. Internet's down. No lights. Dad's furious. Mom crying. I let the phone fall onto the mattress beside me and stared at the cracked ceiling above. It had begun, and I wasn't there to fix it. Not this time. A notification chimed. This time, a voicemail. Curiosity got the better of me, and I played it on speaker while I pulled on a sweater. Mom's voice, soft and shaking. Honey, there must be some mistake. You wouldn't just leave us like this. Please call me. We can fix whatever's wrong. We're family. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words hang in the stale air. Funny how quickly Freeloader turned back into family when the Wi-Fi stopped working. Another ding. A text from Dad. You'll regret turning your back on your family. No warmth there. No confusion. Just rage. I silenced the phone, turned it face down on the nightstand. Elena shuffled into the living room with 2 mugs of coffee, wearing an oversized Yale hoodie and sleep-tousled hair. She didn't say anything at first, just handed me one of the mugs and sat on the floor next to the bed. After a long sip, she said, You look like someone just told you your winning lottery ticket expired. I huffed a humorless laugh. They're panicking. Elena leaned her head against the wall, knees pulled to her chest. Good, she said, voice calm. Sometimes it's not betrayal to save yourself. It's survival. We sat there for a while, listening to the faint sounds of a garbage truck rumbling down the street. A few months later, I started surgery rotations. That first day, I stood beside Dr. Halverson, a man whose voice was as sharp as his scalpel. He didn't waste words, didn't tolerate mistakes. My heart pounded in my chest as I held the retractor, steady sweat running down my spine. When it was over, he turned to me without looking away from the patient. You've got hands I'd trust with my life, he muttered, almost as if he didn't mean to say it out loud. I didn't smile. I didn't thank him. I just stood there, hands steady, breathing slow, but something shifted. It was the first time in years I allowed myself to believe maybe I wasn't the failure after all. The years blurred together after that. Medical school was a gauntlet, endless nights in the library rotations that left me hollow-eyed exams that felt designed to break you. But I didn't break. I couldn't afford to. Every time exhaustion whispered that I should quit, I remembered sitting in that car, remembered the photo of Grandpa Henry, remembered why I started. I graduated near the top of my class. No family in the audience when they called my name. Just Elena cheering louder than necessary from the back row. That was enough. Residency came next. Hartford Hospital. The same state where they lived, but a world away. I changed my professional name to Dr. S. Morrison, using my grandmother's maiden name. It felt like shedding old skin. Meanwhile, whispers reached me through Tyler. The family was struggling. Dad had lost his job, something about downsizing. Mom's health wasn't great. Madison's perfect marriage had cracks showing. The house needed repairs they couldn't afford. They ask about you sometimes, Tyler texted one night. Well, they complain about you, but it's still asking, I guess. I didn't respond. What was there to say? It started small. A Facebook post here, a bitter comment there. But by my 3rd year of residency, it had become a full campaign. Dad had discovered social media with a vengeance. His posts were carefully crafted sob stories. Some daughters are raised to be grateful. Some turn into snakes. After everything we sacrificed, our daughter left us sick, starving, abandoned. Pray for us. The post already had over 100 comments. Some offered prayers. Others, people I barely knew, hurled judgment like stones. Ungrateful brat, one read. Parents give you life, and you spit on them, another sneered. For a second, my hand shook so hard, I almost dropped the phone. Elena glanced over from the kitchen counter, her brows pulling together. Bad. I could only nod, pressing the phone screen to my chest, like it might stop the ache rising in me. By noon, the wildfire had spread. Screenshots flooded my inbox from friends who still cared enough to send warnings. Neighbors, distant cousins, even former teachers commenting on how they'd always suspected something was wrong with that girl. Elena sat down across from me, fierce calm in her voice. They're writing your story for you. Are you really going to let them? I stared at her, the words sinking in deeper than I cared to admit. No, not this time. I powered off my phone and turned to the drawer where I'd been keeping the folder. My insurance. My truth. Inside was a carefully kept record. Years of receipts, screenshots, emails, bank statements. Proof of the thousands of dollars I'd funneled into that house, into those people, without ever once demanding gratitude. Electric bills in my name. Mortgage payments from my account. Repairs funded by my overtime shifts. They had forgotten the cost because they had never paid it. But I hadn't. I spent the next few hours scanning documents, organizing files. Every receipt was a memory, and every memory was a blade cutting away whatever pity I might have felt. But I didn't post it. Not yet. Let them talk a little more. Let them show everyone who they really were. Because I knew something they hadn't counted on. I wasn't rushing into battle with blind anger. I wasn't swinging wildly like a wounded animal. I was patient now, strategic. The small Connecticut town we lived in thrived on gossip, but it also crumbled fast when truth surfaced. All I had to do was wait for the right crack in their facade. The moment when their lies grew too bloated to hold themselves up. And when that moment came, I wouldn't have to say much. Just the truth. That night, as Elena and I ate leftover Thai food on the couch, she raised her fork toward me like a toast. To survival, she said. I smiled faintly, lifting my own fork. To never apologizing for saving yourself. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. I sat at the small dining table in Elena's apartment laptop, open heart hammering in my chest, but hands steady. The air smelled of leftover coffee and rain from the night before. Ordinary scents clashing against the extraordinary moment about to unfold. Carefully, I uploaded the thread. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was clinical, First, screenshots of years of utility payments. Power, water, internet, each bearing my name, each dated clearly. Then came the bank statements showing mortgage payments pulled monthly from my account, even when Dad's paycheck had been enough to cover them. I included old emails between me and the landlord messages, verifying I had funded repairs that had kept the house standing through harsh Connecticut winters. Finally, I laid out a brief timeline. The years I sacrificed vacations, birthday celebrations, even simple self-care to keep a roof over their heads. And then the ending, a simple statement. When they asked me to leave, they didn't just lose a daughter. They lost the person who kept the lights on when they weren't looking. I hit post. For a moment, there was silence. Only the faint hum of the fridge broke the stillness. Then, the phone began to buzz. It started slow. A few likes, some comments of shock, a few private messages from old school friends saying I always wondered why you stayed so long. Then, the momentum shifted like a dam breaking. Dozens of shares, hundreds of comments. Neighbors, former teachers, even people I barely remembered started chiming in. One neighbor posted, "I remember seeing her shoveling their driveway, alone, when she was 16, while her parents yelled from the porch." Another Richard always bragged about how he never paid a cent for household bills once Sophia got her job. Stories poured out like hidden wounds, finally surfacing. It turned out people had seen more than they ever let on. They just hadn't spoken until someone dared to name the truth out loud. Meanwhile, my parents panicked. First, Dad tried to counterattack. He posted a brittle, furious status. "We all have misunderstandings in families. My daughter exaggerates things for sympathy." Sad, really. It backfired instantly. Underneath, commenters weren't buying it anymore. "Funny how you never posted about her paying your bills until now," someone snarked. "You don't look too sick." Cashing her checks, another added, brutal in its honesty. Then, Mom tried a different tactic. Pity. Voicemail after voicemail filled my inbox. "Sophia, please. Your father isn't well. I didn't know he was going to post that. This is all a huge misunderstanding. Please take it down before people think badly of us." There was a time when that pleading tone would have shattered me. Not anymore. I knew now it wasn't about regret. It was about reputation. That afternoon, Elena and I walked down to the fall festival at the town square. The crisp air smelled of caramel apples and hay. Children squealed from the bounce houses. The old brass band tuned up on the stage by the courthouse steps. I felt eyes on me the second I arrived. It wasn't hostility anymore. It was something softer, sadder, a kind of collective realization. I passed by Mrs. Patterson, my old elementary teacher. She gave me a nod and a small, sad smile. Mr. Collins from the hardware store tipped his cap silently. Finally, as Elena and I neared the pumpkin carving station, a woman I barely knew, one of Mom's old church friends, stepped forward. Her hand was gentle as she touched my shoulder. "You deserved better, sweetheart," she said quietly. We all knew. We were just too afraid to say it. Tears stung the back of my eyes, but I blinked them away. I nodded, murmuring a soft, "Thank you," that seemed too small for the weight it carried. Standing there in the heart of the community, where I had once been invisible, I realized something, with a clarity so sharp it almost hurt. The shame was never mine. It had been theirs all along. As the afternoon faded into evening, the square lit up with strings of fairy lights, and the smell of roasted corn filled the air. Children laughed, music played, and for once, I didn't feel like an outsider lurking at the edges. I belonged to myself now. Later that night, as fireworks exploded over the courthouse lawn, In bursts of red and gold, I stood still, head tilted back, watching the sky tear itself open in color. A soft voice whispered inside me. Sometimes the brightest displays come only after the darkest storms. And this time, I wasn't running from the wreckage. I was rising from it. 9 years. That's how long it had been since I walked out of Vincenzo's with $200 and a broken heart. 9 years of sleepless nights, endless rotations, and building myself from the ground up. Now I stood in the hallway outside the OR at Hartford Hospital, watching the trauma team wheel in the latest cardiac case. The name on the chart made my blood freeze. Morrison Richard, my father. I stood there, hands trembling slightly, as I watched them prep him. Heart attack. Massive. Multiple blockages. The attending was out sick. The other cardiac surgeon was in the middle of a complex pediatric case. Dr. Morrison, the charge nurse, called, not knowing the irony. "You're up." I moved fast. The floor was chaos. Voices rising, machines, beeping the crash cart, rattling through the hallway. I peeled off my coat and pulled on scrubs with mechanical urgency. I barely registered my own breath. 1 second, I was standing outside the OR bay, watching my father's unconscious form being rushed in, and the next, I was washing my hands under burning hot water, scrubbing in with a practiced rhythm I hadn't realized was shaking. A nurse handed me gloves. She glanced up at me, her brow knitting slightly. "Dr. Morrison, you sure you want to lead this one?" My gaze flicked toward the operating room. The double doors were already swinging open, the OR team preparing the surgical field. My father, unconscious chest, rising in uneven rhythms, lay on the table like any other trauma patient. Except he wasn't just any patient. "I'm sure," I said softly. My voice was steady, but my fingers weren't. Inside, the OR lights blazed bright. The smell of antiseptic was sharp in the air. Everything was crisp, clinical, exactly how I liked it, exactly how I needed it to be right now. The anesthesiologist glanced at me, then at the chart. "Confirmation, before we begin. Who's chief on this?" I stepped forward. The room was silent. Even the ventilator seemed to pause. "I'm Dr. Sophia Morrison," I said clearly. "I'll be leading the procedure today." From the observation window, something clattered. Madison. I'd seen her name on the visitor log. She'd been here when they brought him in. The surgery began. I directed the first incision with calm precision. My gloved hand, steady my mind, laser-focused. Time became something elastic, stretching, looping, vanishing, as the room moved in a rhythm I knew well. Clamp, cut, suture. I had done this 100 times, but never like this. Never while replaying a voice, yelling through a cold house. "You're the burden here." Never while remembering a man slamming down his napkin at dinner, shouting, "Get out! We're done!" Raising mistakes. Every moment of pain I had stored for years now lived in my muscles, but didn't shake them. We were in deep by the second hour. The damage was extensive arterial tear, internal hemorrhaging, massive cardiac strain. It was a miracle he hadn't died on arrival. But I wasn't here to debate miracles. I was here to do what I did best. And in that room, stripped of last names and history, I was still the best. By the time we closed, I could feel sweat pooling at the small of my back. The scrub nurse patted my arm gently and whispered, "Clean work, Chief." I gave her a nod. I couldn't speak yet. In recovery, he woke slowly, eyes fluttering confused, scanning the room until they landed on me. "You?" His voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here?" I stepped closer, arms, relaxed chart in hand. My name badge was visible, my presence unmistakable. "Hello," I said quietly. I'm your surgeon. The heart monitor jumped. His heart rate spiked again, but this time from recognition. You're not a doctor, he rasped. I stepped closer, calmly setting his chart back on the tray beside the bed. That's what you always said, wasn't it? I kept my tone even measured. Not bitter, but not forgiving either. That I'd never be one. He blinked the haze in his eyes, clearing in slow, unsteady waves. I saw the moment it landed, not just who I was, but where I was standing. What I'd become. He swallowed. It looked like it hurt. You came all this way for this. I pulled a chair toward the side of the bed, but didn't sit. No, I said. I came because a patient needed me. The fact that it was you, that's a twist of fate. Or irony. Or maybe just a sick joke. The door opened. Madison stepped in perfect as always, despite the circumstances. Her face drained when she saw me. Sophia. Her voice cracked. You're the surgeon. Chief of cardiac surgery. I corrected gently. 9 years is a long time, Madison. Dad's voice was weak, but clear. Did you know about the medical school? Madison blinked, then laughed, nervously. What? No, she never told us. Actually, I interrupted. I texted you that night. You replied with, and I quote, "Get over it." Silence. I saved the message, I said. Want me to forward it to you? Dad looked between us, like he was seeing the cracks for the first time. You both made your choices, I said, not waiting for either of them to come up with another version of the truth. You buried me because it was easier than believing I could rise. Later, alone in the call room, I pulled out my wallet. Tucked inside was a photograph, faded, creased at the corners. Just me and him fishing by the lake. I must have been 9. His arm around my shoulder, his face scrunched in laughter. The way he used to look at me, like I was unstoppable. That was before he said, "You'll never make it. You're not strong enough." I turned the photo over and stared at the blank back. No date, no words, just memory. My phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. He's been taking heart meds for 3 years. Paid by someone named R.A. Callahan. That's you, isn't it? I stared at the screen. Yes, I'd been paying for his medications anonymously, even after everything. Because deep down, no matter what they did, I still remembered the man who taught me how to tie a fishing knot. The one who used to sing off-key while flipping pancakes. I never left a note, never hinted. I didn't need gratitude. I just needed to know he'd keep breathing. And he did. For 3 years. On pills, I made sure he had. Even when I barely had enough for myself. The next morning, I found them both in his room. Madison held a printed bill, the pharmacy records, showing 3 years of payments under my alias. Is that true? Dad whispered. I didn't answer. Madison spoke for me. Because you broke her, she said, her voice hollow. You told her she was a mistake. You let Mom throw her out like trash. She was never trash, he murmured. You don't get to pretend it didn't happen. Dad Madison said quieter now. He turned to me again. I don't know what to say. I finally met his eyes. You don't need to say anything. I walked out, this time with no intention of looking back. It was nearly sunset by the time I got home. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I walked straight into the bathroom and turned on the faucet, letting the water run over my fingers as I stared at my reflection. Tired eyes. A woman who'd lost pieces of herself, but somehow still stood tall. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was Dr. Chen, my old mentor from Johns Hopkins. You still haven't filed the transfer paperwork, she said. What's keeping you there? I stared at my coat, hanging on the hook beside the mirror. "There's one last surgery I need to finish," I said quietly. She paused. "You sure it's worth it?" I didn't answer. I hung up, then pulled the coat off the hook and slipped it over my shoulders. As I did, the collar shifted, exposing a thin silvery scar just below my collarbone. I hadn't noticed it in months, from a car crash the week after they disowned me. I'd walked away with broken ribs and a hospital bill I could barely cover, but I stitched myself back together. Alone. Now it was there, visible, real. I ran my fingers along the scar and said softly, "One last cut." The next day, I submitted my transfer papers. Johns Hopkins, chief position. A fresh start in Baltimore, far from the ghosts of Connecticut. But first, there was one more thing to do. I went back to the hospital one last time. Not as a surgeon, but as a daughter, signing discharge papers. The nurse handed me the forms. "Dr. Morrison, it says here, you're next of kin." "I am," I said, signing without looking up. Medical power of attorney. Still valid. She looked at me like she wanted to say something else, but she didn't. And that was fine. In the hallway, I ran into Madison one last time. She stood there, looking smaller than I remembered. "You're really leaving?" she asked. "I already left," I said. 9 years ago. This was just closure. "He did love you, you know," she said, "in his way." I smiled, small and measured. "And I loved him," I said, "in mine." I didn't need to explain the difference. Downstairs, the elevator chimed open. I stepped in and pressed the button without looking back. I reached up and unpinned my badge. The plastic tag with Dr. S. Morrison, printed in bold letters, felt heavier than it should have. As the door slid shut, I whispered to the quiet. They said I was the family failure. I slid the badge into my coat pocket. I chose not to prove them wrong. I chose to become who I needed, without them. The elevator descended floor by floor, past memories, past wounds, past apologies that never came. Because sometimes healing isn't returning. It's walking away whole. Have you ever had to heal from the people who should have loved you most? Tell me in the comments.